Hello, everyone. Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal for this week's episode of Inside Arsenal Extra Time with James Benge of CBS Sports. James, how are you doing? You all good?
I'm very well. Sun is shining. Summer is here. Unfortunately, the sun is not shining where we would like it to be shining right now, which is over Headingley.
Fortunately, they've just gone off for a rain delay because this was pretty much going to be England versus India watch along with James Benge and Charles Watts if they hadn't gone off for a rain delay, because I've turned the volume off, but I would constantly have been sitting like this looking at the screen as I was talking to you. So yes, 181 for naught they've just gone off at with the rain, but hopefully the sun that we've got down here in the south can quickly head up Leeds way and get out over Headingley, because a brilliant test match at the moment deserves the finish anyway. So aside from that, you're having a good week, mate.
Very good week. I would say it's been largely quiet, but we've had some exclusive dropped from some certain people on this pod, which I know we'll come to talk about later, maybe. But congratulations.
Technically, that was last week.
Well, it was with it since we've last spoken. Very much since we've last spoken. Should we talk about that now?
Talk about what?
Your exclusive on Miles Lewis Skelly? Because you don't, when you've got your own show to do, you don't get the praise you deserve.
Okay, give me some praise.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean, I could maybe share as well with the viewers the sort of story of this. Was it Thursday we recorded last week?
I think
Wednesday,
it was Thursday. Yeah.
I will sort of sit down, and what we will both do beforehand is just double check that we're not about to record something that's completely factually incorrect, because some other stories dropped. But for once it was this, or not for once. Well, the story was dropping with you, wasn't it, Charles? And you get a text and a very mysterious sort of, that's interesting. I wonder if that will hold. And I did notice you were rattling through the show as quickly as you could. I, from my side, was convinced you'd heard something about a different player. And so immediately, of course, because we're a very competitive sort when it comes to news, immediately started chasing down a different rabbit hole. But I mean, probably interesting for maybe our viewers to get a sense of how this all works when you, maybe even from when you get like a tip off.
Yeah. Well, it was literally, we were just having our little ramble before we actually press record, didn't it? When I got a message from a contact of mine about it, and I was in that sort of awkward situation then of like, I need to chase this up, really, but obviously we had to record, so I was like, okay, we'll get this recorded and then I'll chase it up, because obviously once you get a message, it's far from a story being able to be published. You've got to chase it up. You've got to confirm it with the contact, basically, who I hadn't even, he'd sent me that message, and then I did the show before I got back to him. And then once you got back to him, obviously, then you've got to go and try and stand it up elsewhere. So yeah, it was an interesting one. The message came in just before we started recording, did the show, obviously finished the show, chased it up, got the sort of confirmation that I needed, that I was convinced it was strong enough, made sure I stood it up, did get it stood out, and then obviously had to get it out as quickly as possible, because when you work in this industry and you've got some of the big heavy hitters like we sort of try and compete against when it comes to stories, you can't sit on something for very long, because they will get it.
Do you still get the jitters? I mean, you and I and everyone we really know will always do the right thing and sort of try and go to the clubs and give them a chance to engage with you before you publish. But do you still get the jitters even when you know you've done the right thing and you're like, oh, what about if someone just tweets in like 45 minutes, this is wrong?
Absolutely. By the time I was writing the story out, because I put it on my website, by the time I was writing it up, by the time I was waiting back from some callback and everything like that, you're obviously constantly checking your timeline to make sure no one else has dropped it in that time. Because as I said, when you're competing against the sort of journalists we've got with the contacts books that they've got, full well it's not gonna be long before they get a sniff of it. So it is an exciting time. It's kind of what you want to get those sort of big stories, isn't it? So yeah, that one worked out. They don't always. That one did, which was nice. Probably
the biggest news of the last week or so, really, from an Arsenal perspective.
Well, there's not been much else going on. Yeah. Transfer. I suppose we've had Zubimendi. He's been here. He's been here. He has signed. So Arsenal have made a signing. Not that it's been announced or confirmed, but Arsenal have made a signing. Miles Lewis Skelly has now signed that contract as well. Again, no announcement yet. This is Arsenal we're talking about, so that will probably come in about 4 months' time. So we've had a couple of good bits of news. I mean, Zubimendi's obviously great that's done and dusted. 36. I've heard he's got number 36, and that did get aggregated massively
That is the thing people really care about.
I know, but I did make sure when I mentioned it on here, I was like, okay, I have heard he's got 30. I'm pretty sure he's got 36. I'm pretty certain that the person who told me is right, but I haven't had it 100% confirmed yet. And I probably won't until that story comes out, because that's not the sort of thing you would get 100% sort of confirmed. And yeah, but it got obviously aggregated. Zubimendi will wear 36, Charles Watts, all everything, but 36. I know there is that.
Like that.
I know, but I mean, 36. He does have a connection with 36. He did have that number when he broke into the Sociedad team, so there is that connection there. It's still a strange looking number for a player of that sort of. Well, we hope is going to be that important to the team.
I find that those sort of numbers hugely unsatisfying, especially from like a big money signing.
What numbers are available?
20.
Let me have a look.
14. Which, of course, is probably not
for
Zubimendi.
Zubimendi can't be 14, can he?
Well, unless he's got grand visions for his development in the future.
Still got Kieran Tierney listed as 3 on the website. I suppose we will till the end of June, won't we?
I mean, I wouldn't like him in 3.
No, I wouldn't like him in a 3 either.
I would quite like Calafiori to take the 3. I don't know if that's
Calafiori.
He usually has 33. And I think he wore that at Bologna as well. But Ricardo, it's just not satisfying.
Yeah,
it's the ones in the 30s that kind of really get me in general. Like I kind of Xhaka 34, I like it. It's obviously a meaningful number, but yeah, and it does sort of it's just gets on my teeth a bit.
Yeah.
The fascinating thing about this as well is it like there'll be people in the comments listening to this saying, "God, they're such losers talking about shirt numbers." We know for a fact, having worked in parts of the industry where you can you can see, oh yeah, people care. People really care. If you think, why do people write about the shirt numbers Benjamin Sesko could wear? It's because people read them. A lot of people read them. I don't know if it's sort of FIFA football manager completionist brain that they like to, they've probably already put Sesko or Gyökeres in the squad and they want to make sure he's got the right number, but people really care about this.
They do. I mean, there's no actual standout number there for him. Obviously, Thomas Partey, we don't know what's going to happen with him yet. And 5 would be a sort of number maybe that you'd consider as a sort of defensive time midfielder, but there's none that sort of absolutely screams Zubimendi, I suppose. And he has got the connection. Anyway, we're probably going to have to wait about 2.5 months for Arsenal to confirm that anyway. So we'll see. Right. I was going to say there's not much going on. Well, there isn't much going on. But we are going to take some questions in today's show. I think when there's not that much going on to really sort of seriously sort of talk about at the moment, I thought this is a good opportunity. Had loads of questions coming both across YouTube, the Discord, as well for Inside Arsenal members. So we're going to use this opportunity to have a bit of sort of mailbag session. We did that with the Arsenal press pass last week, and it went down very well. So I thought we'd do another one of those today. We will, of course, keep checking.
We're begging for the content, people, please.
Something massive might drop in the next 40 minutes or so that we are on. So we'll keep checking, but I highly doubt it.
Things to start dropping, like India are dropping catches.
Yes, indeed.
We're back. We're back out.
We are back out now. So there is going to be also, as well as an Arsenal mailbag, it is also going to be England versus India watch along with James Benge.
And I thought I was being so good because I genuinely ummed and ahed, completely flipping my seating position so I could see it in the living room. And I thought, no, I'm a professional. But you know what? It's your show, Charles. You do what you want.
I will do what I want. No, they're underway. They're underway. And we're underway as well. So we're going to answer questions. And we're going to talk about this one first of all, because I think this is really interesting. Rodrygo. A player I know you've got your sort of reservations about, I would say. Is that right?
Only really in terms of like whether it will happen.
Okay.
He's the one I'd like.
Maybe I'm getting confused. It was more Nico Williams. You had reservations about Nico Williams, but Rodrygo, okay, you're more on board with Rodrygo. So the question comes from Sam from Nigeria. Thank you very much, Sam. You said, what happens if we don't get Rodrygo at the end of the transfer window and miss out on signing a winger? The situation isn't an easy one. I understand that. What other feasible names are in the mix? I know deals are rumbling in the background. That's why we have hysteria in the fan base. So there's a sort of waiting game over Rodrygo because it's very, very clear, obviously, that Arsenal like Rodrygo. They're in the market for a position, for someone in that position. It's that this is kind of like, you remember the Martin Odegaard summer when he went back to Madrid. no one was sure how it was going to play out at Madrid, whether he was going to get a chance to play there or not. Everyone was kind of waiting for the season to start. Ancelotti had just come in for Zidane, hadn't he, at that point? It was like, how's Ancelotti going to use him? Is he going to use him more than Zidane did? And you had to wait and wait and wait. And we had the Buendia links when it was like Arsenal going to sign Buendia, but we all knew that Odegaard was the player they really, really wanted. And they had to decide what to do. Sign a Buendia, or I think there was someone else in the mix that summer as well. Madison, or wait for Odegaard. They waited for Odegaard, and obviously that proved to be a brilliant decision. And it kind of feels like this is going to be the same. If Arsenal are going to sign Rodrygo, who, you know, they are definitely interested in, I think that's pretty obvious. You're going to have to wait until the season, certainly the season gets underway, I would say, before you do it. Is that a gamble worth taking in your view, or do you think maybe, you know, we've seen Nico Williams fall by the wayside heading to Barca accounts? We'll see what happens if someone comes in for a Rafael Leao or someone like that. What do you think?
I think I can understand it and would allow it, because the other cases, it sort of reminds me of the sort of semi-frequent Wenger trolley dashes for strikers. But the difference is Arsenal are at least well stocked in that position compared to sort of when it was Giroud repurposing Walcott or bust. You know, you can go into this season, half a season, with Martinelli, Trossard, pick up minutes elsewhere. Maybe even, you know, when Gabriel Jesus comes back, he could pick up minutes on the left wing. There would be options, and none of those options are particularly unpleasant. And there's always the risk that you kind of buy a Leao, who it's the sort of talent I might gamble on, but there's always the risk that you buy that and you spent a huge amount of money and it turns out to not be better than Martinelli. So I really understand the caution of waiting on the one guy that I think we can all agree is on the market or could be on the market and would be an upgrade on Martinelli in that left wing position. It's very difficult for people to remember that this was their point of view in June, 2 months down the road, when it becomes apparent that Rodrygo is going to stay and fight for his place in Madrid. But I think the intel is there and the interest is there. And I think you do owe it to yourself when you are competing to be the best club in the world to make sure you're in position to get the best player on the market. So I think I could let this one ride, especially if, imagine such a thing, that the striker was in quite soon and all of your other business was done and you're just waiting to see what becomes available. Because maybe then you can be a bit reactive. You can see what happens with I know someone mentioned Matoma last week. Could you tempt Brighton with a bit of money late in the market or someone else? You know, there would always be options, and you obviously need to have a date, maybe a week out from the window closing, where you say, we've got to do something now or it's too late. But I wouldn't want to buy a lesser left wing now and see Rodrygo go somewhere else because you felt you had to do the deal right away.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the point that, you know, Arsenal are pretty well stocked in that position anyway is a really important one when it comes to the left wing. And I also think the point that as long as they get the striker sorted at some point relatively quickly, that lessens the sort of the haste when it comes to a left winger. You can't always get everything done before a season starts. And when you've got a player potentially that you really like in Rodrygo, and you know you've got to wait to see how the sort of lay of the land works in Madrid, that it is maybe where, I mean, go back to Ozil as well. You know, those sort of deals right at the end of the window when, you know, Madrid kind of knew they were signing Bale. I mean, I did my interview with Dick Law last week, and he was talking again about that, how Madrid was signing Bale. They knew they needed to sell some players to bring in some money, and it wasn't sure initially it was going to be Benzema and Di Maria. Then that changed, and suddenly Ozil was put into the mix. So these sort of things happen at the end of the windows where you can get players where maybe at the start of the window they're just not really available. And I think Rodrygo falls into that mix. And so I think you've always got to leave yourself a little bit of leeway at the end of the window to be able to sort of pounce on one of these deals. So as long as they get the rest of the business done, and by the rest of the business, I certainly mean the striker, which is obviously going to be very important. I think they're pretty well stocked elsewhere. Obviously, Zubimendi will be in by then. The keeper will be in by then. Maybe they'd have done something in defence, but we'll wait and see on that. But I was looking at Romano was talking on his YouTube channel earlier on today, and he was really sort of bigging up Rodrygo. He was saying it's a dream target for Arsenal this window, and that Arteta loves him and all that sort of stuff. Have you been sort of? I'm sure you probably have, sort of keeping tabs on it. He didn't come on at all in the Club World Cup in their last game. Madrid. I think Arteta started and he scored for Madrid, and everyone sort of jumped on that. So, that's a sign that maybe Alonso doesn't really factor into interviews. Maybe it's too early to say that, but I think he's definitely one that's kind of worth waiting for. When you look at some of the other targets who might, Rafael Leao, I'm not saying he's a target because I've not really heard any links with Rafael and Arsenal, nothing of substance, but doesn't seem like he's on the verge of going anywhere else. You talk about Matoma, maybe that's something late on in the window. Eze, although I've seen links for Tottenham, hasn't gone anywhere yet. So there are still options out there for Arsenal. It's not like they're sort of all doing a Nico Williams and sort of leaving at the moment.
Yeah. I think with the Club World Cup things, we have to take that with a bit of a pinch of salt, don't we? Because it's at the moment not like Alonso's sort of faced an opponent where he should be naming his A team.
Yeah.
And I think, when we see a lineup of post-gastroenteritis Mbappe and Vinicius, and the midfield three is what we expect, and Trent Alexander-Arnold's playing at right back and all that, and then Rodrygo's not starting, I think then maybe we might have more of a sense. But I know having spoken to Xabi Alonso that his priorities years back I spoke to him, but his priorities will always be about building those foundations, and he almost fits the forward line together a bit later. I think given the sort of situation he's inherited in Madrid, I think his focus will really be on like, how can I get this defense working well? How can I blood in Howson and Alexander-Arnold? And we'll see about Rodrygo later in pre-season. He's not one to rush into a decision, and it does sound by all accounts like this will kind of be a decision that Alonso gets to make. The reporting in Spain is if he wants his new midfielder, he's probably going to have to sell Rodrygo to do it.
Crawley's gone.
I know. I saw.
Watch along. There you go. England 192 for 1. I agree with you on that. Rodrygo's agent's his dad, isn't it? And which is we'll see how that goes. 77 million. I saw that price tag sort of mentioned from Spain. Do you think that's a good price for someone like Rodrygo?
I'm really happy to pay that.
Yeah.
If you look at sort of the going, sort of compare that to Wirtz. I think Wirtz is a better player, but maybe not 30 million better. Like not another 50% on top. I think that's a fair price. Of course, the thing is always going to be you're buying a Galactico. How much are you paying them in salary? And we remember that Alexis and especially Ozil were kind of out a fair way ahead of the rest in terms of the Arsenal salary sheet back in the late Benge years. So, I mean, it could be expensive. And you do sometimes wonder if that's the knowledge of Rodrygo and what that might cost is sort of prompting a little bit of the wheel spinning on the striker as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's true as well. If you factor in a possible really late deal that could be a really, really costly one as well, maybe that's why there seems to be the sort of slow moving approach with the strikers, because you're going to need as much money as you possibly can late on in the window. All those plates being balanced and spun at the same time by Andrea Berta. Right, let's move on to another question. We've got one here, which was on the Inside Arsenal Discord. It was from Rizwan. Said, aside from the new signings that we all know we need, what do you think is the biggest change that needs to happen to get us over the line next season? I personally believe that regardless of who we sign, Arteta needs to get better at rotation to keep our players fresher throughout the whole season. Last thing we need is our entire attack and best defenders going down before the run-in again. Curious if you think the same, or if there are any other issues you think the coaching staff need to look at harder before the season starts.
Such a good question. I don't know how much I mean, I was very critical on Arteta's lack of rotation the season before last. And at this one, I almost think that, well, when half your squad is out injured, who are you rotating them with? It's the real problem of like getting a couple of big injuries early in the season is you got to load those minutes on someone else. They don't get to rotate. Did Bukayo Saka get injured because Martin Odegaard got injured? I don't know the answer to that, but I know what I think. And I think that it certainly increased the load on Saka to an unmanageable level. But I also think I don't know that Arteta had another choice there. If you've got no Odegaard, especially in the position Arsenal were in last season, you're just going to have to play Saka every minute you can beyond the sort of EFL Cup. For me, I do think Arsenal need to, when they're 1-0 up last season, and even to an extent the season before, I think they felt a little bit too comfortable in their defense's ability to just control the game, protect the lead. And they open themselves a little bit up to variance, random chance, a bit of a bad break, Raul Jimenez scoring from his only shot. Without necessarily, while I understand it's really hard to do, I would like to see the team tilt a little bit more towards controlling through their attacking play rather than controlling through the rest defense and the knowledge that Saliba and Gabriel can blot out any counter-attack. But I know that's contentious, and I know that.
Do you think that's an Arteta thing? Do you think that's a? I always wonder that because a lot of time fans will look at it and say, Arteta's too cautious. 1-0, he tries to shut up shop. But then you watch him on the touchline when you see the team sort of playing the way they seem to be playing, when they do seem to go into their shell a little bit, and he's like pushing them forward and telling them to get forward. So is that just the players doing that? Are they sort of falling back, or is that Arteta thing? Because it's a really hard one to answer, I think.
But then if it's the players as a group, and who's responsible for the players as the group, the manager.
Yeah.
That's where I sort of fall down on that. You look at the very first thing Arteta did when he took over, it was tighten that team up, make them a bit more defensive, spend years playing with a back three because he didn't trust the defenders. And I think that sort of sets a tone around Arsenal. Look, the quality of Arsenal's defense is incredible. It's the best defense in the world, to my mind. But I wonder if to win the Premier League, you would be better off having the third best defense in the world if it meant your attack improved commensurately. I don't know. Reasonable people can disagree about that, but that's kind of my view on it.
No, I agree with you. I think they have to go for the kill a little bit more in games. There's no doubt. You can't just keep 1-0 scorelines. It doesn't matter how good your defensive. There's too much. You're leaving too much sort of open there on the pitch. Anything can happen. A deflection, a set piece, a long throw, as we saw against Bournemouth, which completely changes the game, and you end up losing a game that you're winning really, really comfortably because it's only 1-0. You've got to be able to finish games off better than Arsenal did last season. It's just you just can't have that many games that are either 0-0 or 1-0. So obviously scoring goals is really important and killing teams off and going for the kill a little bit more.
It's also a great way to rest your players is to be 2-0 up in the 70th minute rather than 1-0 up.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think he needs to rotate more because even last season, I feel like players like Jorginho and Zinchenko were really, really underused last season, and there was opportunities to give them more minutes and rest players more by playing them, and he didn't take it. So I do think Arteta still does need to improve in rotation. I thought there were signs at the start of last season, before all the injuries hit, that he was getting a bit better at that. We were seeing Saka come off more than we had done. We were seeing Odegaard come off a lot of times. So I thought there were signs he was getting better at it. And then obviously the injuries hit, and your hands are tied a little bit more then because you've barely got any players anyway. But I also think that for Arteta to be better at rotating players, I think the club need to be better at building a squad that he actually fully trusts, because he clearly, what happens if Arteta loses trust in a player, he's just not going to play him. So I think it's obviously important.
The problem with that is someone like Zinchenko can go from heartbeat of Mikel Arteta's team, the man that defines how Arsenal play, to Arteta being like, no, don't want him anymore, get rid.
Yeah, he doesn't help himself in that regard, no doubt about it. So I think we've answered your question there, Rizwan. I certainly agree with you. I think rotation is absolutely crucial, Rizwan, to Arsenal improving next season, keeping things fresh, especially as we get deeper into the season and possibly avoiding injuries. And that's massive as well. I don't know how you really avoid injuries. It's hard. Obviously, so many of them last season. I'm not sure if you can put that down to load management or if you can just put it down to bad luck. Quite a lot of them as well. But that is absolutely vital, because if Arsenal have another season next season, injury-wise, that they did last season, we're going to see the same thing again. They're not going to win the league because you just can't win the Premier League with the injuries that Arsenal had last season. It's just not possible.
Exactly.
Right, here's one from Scott now. He says, Charles and James, please could you discuss why Arsenal struggle to get good value on players they are looking to move on? Seeing reports of Zinchenko to Fulham for 12 million. Our record sales still stands at Oxen Iwobi, 35 million. Liverpool getting 35 million for Quansah. Your guys' thoughts? It's a hard one, that. I just think I think reputation as well. I think Arsenal have been struggling with the fact that they were basically free transfer FC and contract cancelling FC for a long, long time as well. Clubs kind of knew that was a position Arsenal were taking. Yeah. And so when you enter into a negotiation with a club and they know and they've seen your previous history suggests you will just cancel the contracts of players, they'll be like, well, why are we going to give you a load of money? Because probably in 6 months, you're just going to cancel that player's contract and we'll pick him up on a free anyway. So I think they're trying to recover a bit from the reputation that they had. I think we've seen signs that they are doing that. Last summer was obviously good when it came to selling players. I think they also struggle wages wise as well. When you've got players on the sort of wages Arsenal have, it's unless you're selling to a Premier League club, you're not going to get much money from anywhere else because no one can take those sort of wages on. Quansah there, it's not going to be on massive wages at Liverpool, which will allow Leverkusen to pay the sort of money. I also think that Leverkusen deal for Quansah has probably got something to do with the Wirtz deal as well and PSR, which we're seeing more and more with clubs as well, and the prices that players are being traded for.
I mean, there's some things to say about that as well. Quansah, English homegrown, so very useful for Liverpool to have, young. I mean, and I know that Scott rightly points out Oxen Iwobi is the record sales, which I think is right. It's sort of dependent on which of the clauses in the Fulham deal with Smith Rowe have conveyed, which is the sort of thing that no one ever digs out. And I'm kind of remind myself to have a think about that. But, you know, Arsenal got a lot of money for Emile Smith Rowe and for Eddie Nketiah. And I think it's fair to say that those kind of looking at the performances those guys had last season, good in flashes for mid-table Premier League teams, that's really good money. But that's who you'll get good money for. You'll get good money for young English players with upside. Quansah as well, someone that Liverpool would keep round, but you know they'll shift him and maybe look for Gay. Zinchenko doesn't really tick any of those boxes. He's old, he's well paid. I think actually 12.7 million for him from Fulham would be. I'd be surprised that you get that much for him.
Really? I don't think that's enough for Zinchenko. I have to say, I think 15 million is a minimum for someone like Zinchenko. I mean, how old is he? You say he's old. Well, he's still
28.
28? Is he 28? Yes, probably sounds about right. Still, you know, international, Premier League proven.
What's my resale value on him?
28. He is 28. Yeah, he's 29 in December actually. I don't know. 15 million sounds about right to me for someone like Zinchenko. 12 million sounds a bit low.
I'd certainly like more. But you know,
if you're selling to a Premier League club,
Fulham will. I think the trade-off there is Fulham are the sort of team that might actually be able to convince Zinchenko to go and join them. And there are maybe not that many teams in the Premier League beyond the sort of ones that there's a small pool, I would think, of Premier League teams that would both buy Zinchenko and would convince Zinchenko to join them. And Fulham pay well. It's a nice place to live. I mean, obviously, if you're Zidane, you probably don't even need to think about moving. I see the logic there. I don't think it's going to be a huge market for Zinchenko. He's such a particular kind of player.
Yeah. But I mean, in answer to the question, then we both sort of in agreement that I think Arsenal's just reputation was damaged for a long, long time in terms of their selling, and they're trying to build that up. And until you're sort of seen as good negotiators, and you're gonna struggle to get maybe the value that you want.
And it helps if you have good young English players, which Arsenal have had, but they've used them quite effectively.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you look back at some of the sales in recent years. Which ones would you sort of? Is there any sort of come to mind that you just think, oh, that's just not? They just didn't get enough for that sort of player.
Really, no. I think there are a fair few that I look back on and go, they've done a number on the other team there.
Balogun was a really good deal.
Prime example, yeah. I would honestly say, as much as we thought at the time he was better than he was, I look at Nketiah now and go,
oh, that was a good deal. Nketiah was definitely a good deal. No doubt.
Yeah, they've got great money from Palace for him.
Rob Holding, I'm still convinced we got rid of him on the cheap, even though he never played a single game for Crystal Palace. That tweet still surfaces for me, but I'm still
Where is he
convinced.
now? Where has he found a
He's at
new club?
Sheffield United, wasn't he? He was at Sheffield United last season, I think. But I'm still convinced we didn't get enough money for him. 5 million we should have got for Rob Holding.
Why is Sheffield United? Is he back in the Prem then?
No, they didn't go up, did they? They lost to Sunderland in the playoff final.
Of course they did. Sorry, it's northern teams.
Yeah, I'm glad Sunderland came up in that game. I'm glad. Is he at Sheffield United? Was I right?
He was at Sheffield United. I'm just checking if that was on loan.
Is that on loan or is that permanent?
Loan. But then I think he's now left Palace. Or he's going to leave Palace.
Is he? Your boy Glasner doesn't appreciate good defenders. You see, get Holding in.
Yep. Not quite sure he's on Chris Richards level or Max Honsler-Quire, by the way. Oh, what a player!
Right, one from Nick Knack now. Says, afternoon, gents. With the Hatto links and Zinni likely leaving, it would be clear. It would be clear to assume Hatto would be a direct left back replacement, versatile, admittedly. My question is, what does this mean for Miles? He's almost the first name on the team sheet. Does this open up the chance for him to move midfield? Is that the likely long-term goal for him? I can't see Hatto coming in without some guarantees of game time and squad priority. Would he want to be behind Ricky and Miles? What do you reckon? I was listening to the Arscast that went out yesterday with James and Andrew. So James was talking about this, and I was driving along, nodding my head in agreement as he was saying it. That I don't really understand the rush to move Miles into midfield. I just think he's doing so well at left back.
Well, I've been saying that all year long. I've got no agreement from anyone.
I'd agree with you. I don't get the sort of. There seems to be this real sort of groundswell of opinion that Miles should be playing. He plays in midfield anyway. I know he's left back, sort of listed as a left back in the team sheet, but he spends most of his time in midfield. So, and he's a fantastic when he has to defend as a left back. So I'm just, yeah, I don't know what if Hatto was to come in, and obviously we're a long way from that at the moment. But if he was, you'd think he's going to obviously need some minutes to stay happy. And Calafiori's already there, Kivior's already there as well. So. It would be a fine balance in that for Mikel Arteta. But in terms of Miles, I don't think it would mean anything for Miles in terms of being shunted into midfield. I still absolutely think next season he will be first choice left back, whoever signs.
100%. Yeah, I'm with you. Don't see any rush at all to make that move. I think if you've got an outstanding left back and he's, and then all the other special factors that come with him, you want to sort of build and plan around that and almost look at the other midfield qualities as a added bonus, not least because I think you could probably quite swiftly slot him in at left 8. I think he would do that job quite well. But I do think you would need time and patience to blood him in if you wanted to use him at the base of midfield. I think that would be a challenging role. Of course, it could be something that has to happen if Thomas Partey leaves. And maybe then it makes sense. But I'd still think, why would you not just recruit a sort of specialist backup defensive midfielder rather than having your backup defensive midfielder be your first choice left back? That to me seems the sort of squad planning that could come back to bite you because he's loading up on minutes at left back. So I don't see it. I wouldn't surprise me if at some stage in his hopefully long Arsenal career, there's a sort of a moment where he has to go to that position and he excels there, and maybe that changes things. But unless you're forced to do that, you just play Miles Lewis-Skelly at left back. He's brilliant.
Yeah, and it's been the plan for Arteta. It's not like he came into the team and was suddenly put at left back. He started being played at left back when he was still playing for the sort of 23s before he, that decision had clearly been made behind the scenes that people looked at him and thought, he could be a good left back. And in preparation for him really sort of making that jump towards the first team squad, he had started playing at left back for the 23s as well. Also at the bottom there, Nick Knack says it could also be that we're looking at it differently to the way Mikel would, where we see too many players for position. He sees healthy depth and real competition. And I think that goes back to when we were talking about rotation as well. If you've got players that you really, really, really trust, then hopefully we would see him rotate a little bit more. If Zinchenko went and Hatto came in, and this is obviously all hypothetical, do you think there's room for Hatto if just Zinchenko goes and you've still got Calafiori, you've still got Kivior, and then you bring Hatto into the mix as well? Is there room for him?
I think there probably is.
I do.
If we
I
sort
think
of-
there probably is.
Yeah, if we run down this, we've got two. Like, I'm almost going to put Hato in the centre back box, and I know he plays a lot of left back for Ajax, but I would have you if you kind of do it in a depth chart sense. You've got Lewis Skelly and Calafiori as your left backs, Gabriel Hato as your left centre backs, Kivior as well. It complicates things a bit, and that's the one I would kind of really keep an eye on. Does Kivior go and it sort of cross funds Hato, and then Saliba, Tim, kind of to cover the right side of the defense. Sadly, you really only have Saliba, Timber, and White. It would be brilliant if I could say you have Tomiyasu, but I don't think it's sensible squad planning to consider Tommy. Sadly, it just isn't. And so I see the logic. Part of me is just like, why is it a left-footed centre back? If you want to invest, would you not be better off getting someone to cover on the right side a bit more that can be a number 2 for Saliba, and then you allow maybe like a really young guy, so that if you needed a run of games, you could play Timber and White and build this other guy up and give him sort of 10 games over the course of the season, if that. That to me feels like a more sensible investment than just indulging Mikel Arteta's curious interest in left backs.
Loves the left foot. It wouldn't be an Arsenal transfer window without them signing a left-footed defender. So 2 down now. Roots in. 2 down.
Who's out? Pope.
Yes, Duckett's
That's fine.
Duckett's 121 not out at the moment. Right, moving on. Simon's got in touch on the Discord, says, with Carlos Cuesta leaving, did we miss a trick letting Jorginho go? Could we have offered him a job on the coaching front? I noticed United are giving Evans a contract in a non-playing role.
Love this.
Brilliant idea. I mean, he was literally on the coaching staff anyway for the final 6 months of the season. It was quite funny when he made the trip to Paris for the second leg of the semi-final and was listed as a substitute, but he was literally there as a coach. It was very obvious he wasn't going to be getting on the pitch. He wasn't able to get on the pitch, but he was coaching from the sidelines. But look, George, the thing is with this, it's a nice sort of thought, but Jorginho clearly still thinks he's got a lot of life left in him as a player at the moment, isn't it? So I don't think we really missed a trick. We could have offered it to him, but I can't imagine he would have taken it. He's gone to Flamengo to play, and he got a 3-year deal, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, 30. He's only 33.
Yeah,
he feels a lot older than that because he's always played like a man that was 33. He was playing like a 33-year-old 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you say, 3-year deal. And I know very few people watching this will have watched the Club World Cup. Part of my job is I kind of have to watch some of it on catch up. He just ripped Chelsea to shreds.
I saw he played really well. Apparently, people were raving about his performance.
I mean, I see the appeal for him. And what I would say is Jorginho is going to be a great coach one day. So I'll be intrigued to see if he does ever come back to the Emirates in some capacity, or Stamford Bridge, or wherever.
Yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised, but I do think it's a little bit early for him. Right now, Pavlinho, what a great name. Sounds like a Brazilian number 8 there, number 10. Hi, Charles. Great show as always. You are my point of calm when I try to fight off all these conflicting transfer rumors. Thank you very much. I tried to be. What do you think about the fact that Berta theoretically prefers Gyökeres and had some conflict with Partey's agent before we signed him, as Arteta prefers Sesko and wants Partey to stay, and things were looking to go in this direction. Now, suddenly we moved to Gyökeres and we let Partey go. Thank you. I mean, we should flag up that we haven't let Partey go yet. Those talks, as far as I'm aware anyway, are not absolutely done and dusted yet. So there is still a chance there could be some sort of breakthrough with them. And we don't really know if Arsenal have gone the route to Gyökeres yet. Again, I don't think anyone really knows what's going on with the striker situation. I would love to see it right now and act like I do, but I have no idea what's going on when it comes to the strikers. It was interesting. I mean, if you see, actually, no, you haven't seen. We spoke about it before we started. Thomas Partey gave this interview over in Ghana, where he's been doing stuff for the Thomas Partey Foundation over in Ghana, and he gave an interview and he talked about his exit from Atletico, and it was really interesting because he said that he was going to sign a new contract. They gave him the money that he wanted. It was just before he left for Arsenal. They offered him the money that he wanted, but they were only going to give his agent 3% commission rather than 10% commission, and that was something that Partey was angry with. He said he wanted 10% because that's what all the agents at Atletico were getting for deals, and so why shouldn't his agent get the same? And And that became literally a point that the whole contract talks broke down because he went away, he thought about it. The agent said to him, I think it was the agent who said to him, look, we can find a way around this or something like that. And Party was like, no, this, you should be getting what everyone else is getting. And ultimately the talks broke down and he signed for Arsenal. And obviously Andrea Berta was heavily involved in those talks at Atletico at the time. It wasn't just him, it was the president, it was other people as well. So it wasn't just like this was Andrea Berta versus the agent. It was the whole of the Atletico sort of executive department who had put this all together. But it is quite interesting, the fact that we're now seeing Andrea Berta overseeing the Thomas Partey contract talks, and they've not gone the way that certainly Partey side so far want them to go. So it does sort of factor in on it a little bit. Do you see a way, I suppose, that we're seeing Berta's influence a little bit play out in this window, maybe more so than we kind of predicted in this first window of him having come through the doors?
Not really. I mean, the Gyökeres one will be the one where I think we can tell. In the end, Andrea Berta is not going to let Thomas Partey go because of a animus from 5 years ago that we have to say was really quite bitter. The whole fallout from that. I remember speaking to people in Madrid at the time when Arsenal triggered the release clause that felt really let down by Partey and Arsenal, but kind of especially Partey because he was their guy. And in the end, that didn't stop Andrea Berta from coming to work for Arsenal. It didn't stop Thomas Partey from being part of the team. It's just the nature of working in elite football when you kind of move between club to club that you're going to run into a lot of people that you've fallen out with in the past. It's a small world, and you've got to be able to put it to one side. You know, even as Atletico Madrid were raging at Arsenal, they're perfectly happy at the time to take Torreira, wasn't it, on loan. The Gyökeres one is interesting. Honestly, I think to an extent, we sort of boil these down to individual people, because it makes for an intriguing story. My read on this has always just been that there's not a lot kind of yet separating Gyökeres and Sesko, and Arsenal probably need to understand all the exact parameters, and then they can pull the trigger. So it sort of always feels like it waxes and wanes. And maybe, I mean, it is fair to say that when Berta arrived, he kind of brought Gyökeres to the table as an idea to consider a bit more. But I don't really think Berta is a director of football that can impose any decision on Mikel Arteta.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
I am nearly certain he is not.
No, I agree with that. Martine on the Discord asks, any word on Nwaneri's contract with Miles now being wrapped up? It's gone a bit quiet around Ethan, or will he be the next one up? I don't know if he'll be the next one up. He might be. I don't know. I mean, I don't really have anything majorly new nothing new to add on Ethan. I know that talks are ongoing with him, and Arsenal are hopeful, like they were with Miles, that it will come to a successful conclusion relatively quickly. I don't really see there being an issue. I think it will get done. You know, each contract takes a certain amount of time to do. There's a lot of other contracts being talked about at the moment when it comes to Arsenal as well. So it might have gone a bit quiet, but I've certainly not heard of any issues. I don't know about you.
No, and of course, you know, right now it's going to be quiet because Ethan's been at the Euros, under 21 Euros, and
he'll be going off on holiday. I had a question about this actually earlier on. Someone saying, "Well, I've heard that Ethan's not coming back till the end of July. Why is that?" It's purely just down because he's at the Euros. Will then need to have at least three weeks off after that. So he was just not going to be around Arsenal till basically August.
Yeah, and you can't. You might be able to talk with agents, and you will talk with agents, but you can't finalize these things without the player. And agent and club will have a view there of that they actually don't want to harm Ethan's chances of doing well at the Euros by distracting him with contract talks. They can proceed a bit, but they certainly can't get across the line until Ethan's not involved in the Euros, I wouldn't think.
No, and even if after that, you wouldn't really want to bring him home for his holiday early.
No.
His first season in the first team, you know, loads and loads of football, then gone off and had a summer tournament. You wouldn't want to bring him back, and you'd want to say, go on, have 3 weeks, put your feet up, don't even think about football now before coming back for pre-season. So yeah, I think
it's actually the hardest thing to get footballers to do. is to get them to go and properly take a holiday, because they're, you know, these young footballers are so work obsessed that you really do need to make sure you're not giving them an excuse to distract themselves from their holidays.
Yeah.
Not every footballer, I should say.
Right, here's one from Max. He says, gentlemen, do either of you know whether Arsenal's financial situation is one where it'd be significantly better for them to make financial splashes in either this financial year before July 1st or in the next one? Could Arsenal be taking their time with Sesko Yokere's situation because they want to do the deal? So because they want the deal they settled on to happen on July 1st or on next year's books?
I would say at this stage of the year, it doesn't really matter, because you're amortizing the contract over however long, you're amortizing the fee. And you're the wages, what is a week of Sesko or Gyökeres's wages? I know there's the PSR calculations, but like I said last week, Arsenal are reasonably okay with that. I suppose the advantage would be you would have of doing it in July the 1st is you would have, if you think of it in a 3-year cycle, you'd have the summer of Rice, Havertz, Timber, big spending summer and then a relatively fallow year of Calafiori and Marino. Am I missing anyone else?
No, that's pretty much it. Oh, Raya.
So no, yeah, I mean, we probably took in as much as you spent, and then you would have your next, what we expect to be big spending summer. I can see why accountants might be telling Arsenal there's value in that, sort of having a bit of space in the 3-year PSR calculations. But kind of, I mean, from a straight financial perspective, like we're now at the 1 week stage, so I think that would be okay. I think.
Ollie now says, hi, Charles and James. Thank you, Charles, for reading for the answer to my previous question regarding Arteta's target profile and approach. Really appreciated the clarity. No problem. Can you shed any light on this bizarre trend with clubs, including Arsenal, delaying transfer announcements to put a big profile one first? See in this particular window with us and Liverpool as an example, they're done deals for Frimpong and Kerkez, both completed before Wirtz. That's not right. Kerkez has been not even completed yet, is it?
No.
But had to wait for Wirtz to be announced first. Everyone knows we've signed Zubi and potentially done a deal for Kepa. Are they making us wait so they can announce a new striker first? Why is this? Why not announce instantly for the fans? This is interesting because honestly, on the Discord at the moment, there's a lot of sort of talk about, you know, sort of looking what other clubs are doing and why Arsenal are waiting so long to announce transfers, to announce things. Because obviously Zubimendi's done. We know that. I know that, you know, Mars Lewis Skelly's done as well. We haven't had announcements. It's tough to give a definitive answer on it. I don't think it's, by the way, it's not to do with announcing the big signing first. That's not the case. You know, they're not waiting to announce Zubimendi because they want to announce a striker first. You know, Zubimendi will be announced before a striker arrives. I can predict that very, very confidently. But there are lots of different things. It's like you get a deal done for a player, you get it signed, but then a lot of the time you've got to marry it up with what their sponsorship commitments, like Adidas. If they're an Adidas player, they got to do stuff with Adidas that's tied in with what the club are doing, different photo shoots, different announcements, first with Adidas, with Arsenal, with whatever sponsorship brand they're with. You got to, is the media team all there to do all the media stuff? There's lots of things that have to come together before an announcement is made. I do think Arsenal take longer than most clubs, I have to say.
Yeah.
From getting to the point of confirmed to actually announce, I do feel like Arsenal take longer than most. I don't know if that's just because we've got our Arsenal hats on and we pay more attention to it.
I think no. As someone that has more of a generalist view, Arsenal do take longer. I think they really go to town on these things, though. I think that's
I don't know. Sometimes I think that, but then other times I think, oh, they're going to go massive on this one. You know, they're waiting, they're going to get it, and then suddenly when they do announce it, you're just like, oh, was that it? I can't remember one specifically off the top of my head, but I remember thinking, oh, there was going to be loads of razzmatazz about this announcement. And then there actually wasn't. And
I think the glory days of transfer announcement videos are kind of over right now, aren't they? You remember the sort of when Aston Villa were doing like the Love Island one in the summer of 2019 and Mkhitaryan saying
Mkhitaryan one was great. That was
all that. And you know that was, I mean, the story with that was obviously like the guys on the Arsenal media team had a sense that this was in the ether because it was being rumored. Often, like, not always, but sometimes these guys just know what we all know. And it was sort of like, well, we might not get another chance to record this. We might as well record it and see what happens. It certainly wasn't like Mkhitaryan and the team doing that announcement were privy to any confidential information. Yeah, it does take too long from Arsenal. I do agree.
Yeah, but I suppose in answer to Wally's question, there are a lot of things that have to come together for before, lots of things have to be signed off, not just at Arsenal level, but various media brands level with the players and all that sort of stuff as well. But yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I think Arsenal would definitely long it out more than most clubs do. We got one from Warwick now. This is the last one of the show. It says, "Hi Charles and James. How big of an impact do things like homegrown status or international representation play in terms of a transfer negotiation? For example, Martinelli and Saliba worth 5 to 10 million more to a Premier League club because they are considered homegrown. Does someone like Sesko lose value based on sponsorship opportunities for Slovenian international compared to someone like Ollie Watkins, who is an England international? Do these type of things play a role?"
I would say for Martinelli and Saliba, that is more than 5 to 10 million pounds worth of value. It's really hard to get your homegrown quotient, especially in the Champions League or European competitions. It's really hard to have your club developed homegrown players like Martinelli and Saliba. So it's worth an awful lot. And that is why you see, sorry about the airplane going past me, that is why you see English players move for a fee that an international player wouldn't get close to. The Sesko one is interesting. I can't say I wouldn't like necessarily be able to speak to that specific example, but there's always this balance between like someone like Ollie Watkins, the greatest of respect to him, a hero for his performances at Euro 2024. He's not the biggest footballing name in England. And so, when I put on my TV yesterday, there's adverts with Jude Bellingham, there'll be adverts with Trent, I'm sure, Cole Palmer as well. And so there's that level. And of course, that's great to have. But Benjamin Sesko, I would imagine, is got to be the second most famous athlete in Slovenia. Luka Doncic and then Sesko. Apologies to anyone I've missed out there. And there can be like value to that, to being a sort of real superstar. I mean, the ideal scenario is you sign someone like Kanu, don't you? Who just brings you this entire generation of fans in a big country like Nigeria. But yeah, I think that, I mean, what I would say is that does matter somewhat. But like,
does it matter
you
in
don't
transfer
sign a player for that
negotiation?
reason.
No,
It's a nice
does it
thing
matter
to
in
have.
the question was about, does it matter in the negotiation? I'm not
Yeah.
sure it matters. I don't know. Do you think a selling club would say, okay, we're going to put 10 million pounds more on to the transfer fee because we know what you're buying here and what it's going to do in terms of your
I would think that would matter to the salary negotiations.
Yeah, more so the salary and what the agent's going to try and get rather than the actual sort of transfer negotiation.
I
think salary-wise, because obviously agents aren't stupid. They know what their players worth and what they are in terms of a brand. I mean, you look at what the Ozil signing did for Arsenal in 2013, 2014, for example, and the shirts that were sold and what that did for whoever. Was it Nike back then? I think it was Nike in terms of the shirt sales and things like that. And it was I watching the other day. Who was the who owns or is the president of the club that in Saudi that Neymar went to? He gave an interview to BBC the other day, and they were asked about Neymar and whether it was like such a costly mistake. He was like, I don't care. He got us 200 million more followers or something like that. So those sort of players, they can, in what they do for the brand and what they end up making money elsewhere, can be absolutely huge. So yeah, I'm sure it has a part in contract negotiations, but I'm not sure it would play that much of a part in terms of transfer negotiations.
But the other one definitely does.
Club to club. Right, that's about it, mate. I think we're done. We're through the questions. Thank you as always, everyone, for sending them in. Appreciate it as always. Unfortunately, we haven't really had too much new news to talk about in today's show. I'm hoping surely this time next week we're going to have
this every week. And
I know I keep saying it, but the closer we get to pre-season starting, the more convinced I am with each week that ticks by. I mean, Kepa, that should hopefully be done by the end of this week. He's back from holiday now. James reported earlier on this week that he's due to London Colney this week to get it done. I mean, it makes. I was talking about this on the Discord. That one makes no sense to rush. It's like it's done. It's just a case of signing. Why do you want to pay 2 or 3 weeks extra worth of wages when you can just let Chelsea pay those wages until just before pre-season, sign him, get him on board? But yeah, in terms of the striker, obviously, hopefully things move forward very, very quickly, because I think for our sanity, everyone's sanity, more than most, we need something to happen with that. But James, it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you for joining me. Thank you everyone for watching and for listening. I'll be back in the morning with my usual show. Anything you want me to discuss in that, get down into the comments. You know what to do. Leave a question, leave a comment, and I'll pull some of them together and get them included. Take it easy, mate. Enjoy the cricket. We are 238 for 2, 133 runs to win as we end this show. Enjoy the rest of it. Hopefully another glorious Headingley run chase for England. Take it easy, mate.
Bye-bye.